Hi there, everybody. It's Renessa Boley Lane, and I want to welcome you to another conversation on creating your perfect work. If you follow me, then you know I am all about equipping you to discover, design, and get highly paid doing work you love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing a big idea to life. And so we're in the middle of a 7-day series on overcoming overwhelm, overcoming busyness, and creating more time, space, and focus to really get highly paid doing work you love. And so I'm really excited about all the conversations, and especially with today's topic, because today's topic is going to help you understand the psychology of being busy. Like, we're going to get all up in your head today. It's going to be a lot of fun, but there's so many mindset shifts that we have the opportunity to make as it relates to what we accomplish, but more importantly, like how we accomplish it. And when you make those shifts, it's going to give you more time, it's going to give you more space, it's going to give you more focus. But what I'm most excited about is that it will release the pressure, and the pressure that so many of us women feel as we're trying to juggle work and life and all of the, all of the in between, right? And so the beautiful soul that is sharing the screen with me with an amazing smile is Grace Marshall. And Grace is the author of 3 books, actually. She wrote 21 Ways to Manage the Stuff That Sucks Up Your Time, which by itself tells you should read it, How to Be Really Productive, and a 3rd book called Struggle. And Grace helps people to adopt new ways of working and thinking about their work to replace stress, overwhelm, and frustration with success, sanity, and satisfaction. And so I was immediately drawn to Grace's work, and I reached out to her. I was like, I need to talk to you because I think you would be awesome. But before we even get started, I really wanted to put in a plug for Grace's book, because I actually read her book, the book, How to Be Really Productive. And if you've ever read a book, or you've listened to a podcast or a sermon or something, and you felt like the person on the other end was just talking to you, like, man, they got your number, they're all in your head. This is what Grace's book feels like. And so she taps into your challenges, your struggles, your emotions, your desires, all of that. But, she makes you feel like, man, I'm not alone. Like, everything that every other woman is feeling, you feel as well. And so there was just a language in that I thought was really refreshing. And I haven't told you that yet, Grace, so I'm telling you now, that aside from just the content, it was just an awesome read. And I think that readers just feel like, man, she gets us. And so if you have the opportunity to read her book, there's strategies in there. She gives tons of strategies on what to say, how to say it, what not to say. So there's lots of practicals, but that feeling of really feeling connected and feeling seen is something that is rare in books. And so I highly recommend folks read Grace's book, How to Be Really Productive, in addition to all the other stuff that she says. So now I'm off my soapbox. And with that, Grace, I really want to welcome you to the show. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to share your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me, Renessa, because I know there's so much on this topic, and and I think particularly for women who are high achievers, it's like we all want to know, like, what's the latest thing, what's the best thing, and so I really appreciate the job that you're doing in curating, because otherwise we can get overwhelmed with all the stuff that we can learn, but also inviting me here to share this journey.
Yep, it's going to be fun. So, obviously the interview series is about creating your perfect work, and perfect work is that ideal role in the marketplace, in a career or business where like, this is what I was born to do, right? And perfect work is not to be mistaken for perfection, right? That's not the goal. Like, perfect work doesn't mean that you're without challenge, that it's not hard, that you don't have difficult conversations. Like, all of that is part of perfect work, but it's the mountain that that you were born to climb, so to speak. And so I'm curious, Grace, because you often say that you are not naturally organized. And so the question is, how did you actually get into this work and serving women in the way that, not just women, but just serving people in the way that you serve them?
Yeah, do it's so funny when I came across your work and what your definition of perfect work, because if you had asked me 15 years ago, where do you think your perfect work is, I would would not have picked time management or productivity as my thing because I'm naturally disorganized. It's not something I see as a strength. But even if you go further back, if you met me as a child at school, I was the shyest girl in class.
Yeah.
No one would have picked me as the person to come and speak to a room full of strangers, or speak on a stage, or speak and lead in a workshop room. So for me, it wasn't an obvious mountaintop experience. It was very much an evolution, a slow discovery of recognizing, actually, there are some things that I really love doing, some things that I do so naturally that I overlook.
Yeah.
And what does that look like in the different spheres that I end up in? So I think for me, it was one of the big things I found was this shift in perspective from, do I qualify and do I belong here and do I fit in? Because if I looked at productivity in that sense, I'd go, no, that's not me.
Not me.
But instead it was, okay, where am I? Where do I stand? What do I bring?
Yeah.
Is it helpful? And, do I enjoy it? Does it light me up?
Yeah.
So in all the different situations I've ended up in, I started asking that question, like, what do I bring to this? What perspective do I bring? And if it's different from what's currently there, then how does that help? Yeah. And what ended up happening was this kind of refreshingly human perspective that a lot of people have said, I feel like you're in my head. I feel like you really understand. And it's a perspective that maybe didn't exist before in traditional time management stuff.
Yeah. I want to pause there for a moment because it's not necessarily the topic today. We're going to talk about productivity, but I think everything that you shared for women that are listening in, if you are trying to figure out what your perfect work looks like, get the replay and go right back and listen to everything that she said, because there's a discovery process. There's a discovery, but then your perfect work is so natural to who you are. And sometimes we are trying to copycat someone else, or we're looking out at the people that we emulate, the folks that we look up to in our workplaces or, whatever. And we look at them and we're like, we're not like them. We don't look like them. We don't sound like them. That isn't our experience. It's not our perspective, but it's actually the uniqueness of what you bring that actually makes you attractive to whoever is supposed to be your audience, whether the audience is a hiring manager or the audience are clients and customers, right? And so the fact that Grace talks about being refreshingly human, I think that phrase really captures who she is. And so for someone who might be her ideal client, when I'm looking at her content, I was so drawn to it because it was refreshingly human, right? Whereas someone else might be super formulaic and super framework-like, and that will be appealing to their audience. So you get to be authentic in who you are and take stock of those things, the uncommon stuff, or the things that you think are common that truly are uncommon in the marketplace. And so I hope it encourages someone who's listening to be like, okay, I'm not crazy. I really should be doing the thing that's, in my head to do. So that's that piece there. But you dedicate a portion of your book, Grace, to this kind of love-hate relationship that women have with being busy. So tell us more about that, because I actually thought it's true, but I thought it was fascinating as well.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, if you ask anybody, how's work, how's life? Busy is the number one answer that we get. And in fact, if you ask anybody in business, how's business? You almost expect them to go, yeah, it's busy. And you expect that to signal something good, to say, if I'm busy at work, if I'm busy in business, it means I'm in demand, it means I've got a lot of customers coming my way. Yeah. But, there's a really interesting thing around busyness and productivity, because what feels busy, what feels productive, often is just busyness. Yeah. So what happens is, from a psychology point of view, we get a dopamine hit. So when we feel busy, when we feel like there's lots going on, it feels like we're doing something, and we're activating our drive system, and that feels good. We get these dopamine hits of going, I'm sending this email off, I'm doing that, I'm dealing with stuff over here. And so it can be addictive in that way. But actually, if you then take a step back and ask, what am I busy doing? Where am I going with this? What we can find is that actually busyness is stopping us from doing the things that really matter to us, or making space for the things that matter to us. Now, the problem is we get so used to being busy that we go, I haven't got time to do anything else because I've committed to all of this stuff already. And there's a certain worth and belonging that we identify, I think, in our
Yeah.
Individually for ourselves, but also in our culture.
Yeah.
It's like, ask a busy person. If
Mm-hmm.
you want something done.
If you want something done, yeah.
Yeah. So chances are, if you are, already, if you're a high achieving woman, you probably are where you are at. Yeah, you are where you are because you're really good at being busy. You're really good at getting stuff done. You're really good at being the go-to person that other people come to and rely on you to make things happen, probably last minute, probably with half the budget, and whilst you've got everything else going on. And there can be definitely something that feels good about that. So I think that's why we like being busy. Yeah. And I think it's important to notice that, because if we just go, oh, I don't want to be busy anymore, and we don't understand that payoff that we get, we're not understanding the trade-off.
Yeah.
So, just recognizing, okay, I get something out of being busy.
Yeah.
Is one side, but then actually, what is busyness costing me?
Yeah. What I took from that point when I read it was obviously what you said. There's on the one hand, there's a lot of validation that comes to all of us for being busy and just being martyrs and all of that. And then it becomes a great excuse to not do the scary stuff and we're going to talk about some of that later, but what I recognized was that when we talk about mindset shift, there has to be a decision at some point that we make that says, I am not willing to be busy. Like, that's not okay. That is not how I'm going to live my life. Because once I make the decision that that's not who I am, then I can start making different decisions on how do I make that true. But so long as there's some attraction to being busy, so long as there's this badge of honor, this significance that I get from just being so spent, and so just even in our language and how we represent our lives, when there's a reward there, we're not going to change. But when you draw the line in the sand that I'm done with that, then I now get to make different decisions around what systems am I going to put in place? What things am I going to cut out? What am I no longer going to do? Because I'm not a busy woman. Like, I want to be the woman that always has enough time to do whatever it is that I want to do. So if a friend calls and if someone needs me, or they want to plan a trip and we want to go wherever, oh, sure, I've got plenty of time. How do we make it happen? Like, I don't want to be the person that's like, oh, I can't. Like, that to me is unattractive. It hasn't always been that way, but now it's very unattractive. I mentioned that my daughter is having her 4th birthday, and it's now birthday weekend. After we have our conversation, we're going and we're feeding the horses, and and I want to be the person who gets to check out and say, this is what I'm doing, and really be present for that. But that's not always how it's been.
And there's a choice in that, isn't there? It's choosing to put down the person who says yes to everyone and everything, to going, no, this is what I choose to make space for. And this is what I choose, because the reality is we live in a world where work never ends. So if you wait for other people to stop asking you for things, if you wait for the work to stop, it's not going to happen. So you're never going to have spare time. It's about deciding, okay, actually, if I want my time to be like this, if I want this to be my focus, then actually there's going to be a trade-off there. There are going to be choices I need to make. Yeah. And there's a bravery to that.
It is.
Because people will go, oh, okay, you're not busy, or oh, you're saying no to this. So there will be, there'll be an awkwardness to it. And there will be a pushback to it. So it's almost kind of understanding, I'm kind of trading off busyness for whatever I decide productivity looks like for me. Yeah.
I'm going to share just a personal example on this point. So I think it's important just to help folks understand how deeply ingrained this idea of being busy in our how we perceive ourselves and how we have other people perceive us. So as I'm preparing for this interview series, I had decided that I wasn't going to run about like a chicken with my head cut off, and that I was actually going to dedicate time for it, which meant that when I reached out to the different speakers, Grace included, I had said, okay, I need to schedule time to connect with them to figure out if they're a fit for the show and all of that, which meant that I'm going to dedicate all of next week to having these conversations. And so then when I sent we connected, she says she was interested. I had literally blocked off my calendar for these conversations. And I wanted to give people as much time, many options as possible, because Grace is in the UK, I'm in the States, there's folks that are in Australia, like the time zones are all over the place. And so I was like, I need to make sure that the calendar's open to accommodate folks. And so I put it out there, cleared my calendar, had all of these open slots. And then I thought, well, they're going to think that I'm just so available, that I'm just like, if they have all these availability, then they're going to think somehow I am not as valuable because I'm not busy. When in actuality, the priority of the week was to get that work done, so that then we could create this for you guys. That was the it was the most important work that I could be doing for that week. And yet in the back of my mind, I was like, these folks are going to perceive that I am not busy. They have too many options to choose from. And so again, when we talk about the psychology, if I go in with that mindset, I'm always going to overload myself. I'm always going to be overwhelmed. It's never going to feel like fun. Even if I achieve the mark, I am going to burn out. And so for some of you, that's the mindset. And so this idea of being free, there's a stigma associated with that. So we wanted to drive that home, because if that's the case, doesn't matter what strategy Grace gives you or anyone else, you're going to sabotage it, or you're not going to do it, because it goes against the identity of I'm a busy woman, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm off my soapbox on that one too.
And I think you just said something that I want to pick up on as well. If we fill our schedules full of really, really good stuff and we pack it in so tightly, we lose the fun out of it.
It's gone.
It's gone. Like it happens to me. Yeah, when people ask, oh, can you come and speak here? Can you come and run a workshop for us? It's like, yeah, I love this work. But if I have too much on, then I get into this mindset like, oh, I've got too much going on. And I'm going from one thing to another, and I lose the point of all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So in the book, you talk about this concept of the void, right? And the void, as you put it, is that space between kind of where you get this first big bright idea, whether that bright idea is, okay, I want to change the job, I want to start this business, I want to, have this mission, or, this project, this idea. And so the void can be weeks, it could be months, it could be years between kind of idea and I'm really somebody with this idea. And I love the concept, because I know from personal experience and from every woman that I've worked with, like in order to get highly paid doing work you love, you have to go through the void. You have to go through the void. But how you show up in the void will determine whether or not it's an overwhelming, arduous process, or whether or not there's kind of peace and joy in the midst of you getting where you want to go. And so the quicker, we're going to talk about kind of 5 to 6 different kind of mind shifts you need to make when you're in the void, because every one of you that's logged on, you are either in a void or you're about to make a decision that's going to put you in the void. So this is the place where you want to start writing down some things. So because if you can expect it, then you can figure out what shifts do I need to make, so that I get through the void quicker, but more importantly, because it's not just about what you accomplish, it's about the level of passion and freedom and meaning and joy and peace that you experience in that process. And so I'm going to talk about the first one that you mentioned, the kind of the first mindset mental shift that you make in the void. This idea that you will not know everything. Tell us what you mean by that, and why that's critical in the void.
Yeah. So I think one of the seductive things about being busy is we're often busy with things we know how to do. Yeah. It's like somebody asks us to fix something, so, oh, I know how to do that, I can do that. And so we get used to being in a position where our value comes from things that we know how to do. It comes from our confidence, it comes from our competence. And often when we go into the void, we're going into new territory. Like we don't know what's coming up. There are things we haven't figured out yet. Yeah. And there will be often, especially if we're used to high performance and high achievement, there'll be a part of us that wants to work out everything. Like, let me figure it all out, let me put the whole plan in place, and then I'm going to do it, because we want that same feeling of competence and confidence as we go through the process of doing something new. We're used to being the expert, we're not used to being the beginner again. And so we want to be able to move forward with that expert sort of feeling to it. But that quest for certainty will keep us stuck. So I talk about it in the book, How to Be Really Productive, but I also talk about it in the book Struggle. that we think knowing keeps us safe, but it also keeps us stagnant because we just stick within our comfort zone of what we know. So actually, if we're going to be stepping into the void, if we're going to be stepping into doing something new, then we need to let go of that shore and let ourselves go into that, into the ocean of the unknown territory. And what that means is, we won't know everything. So stop trying. Stop trying to have all the pieces of the jigsaw in place before you start. Just work out what's the next step. And then, okay, where do we go from there? And actually, as we go through, that leads us on to the next thing, which is that there is no right. Because what we tend to think, or what we like to think, is that it's going to be a straight line. It's like a GPS. That's where I want to get to. This is the quickest route to get me there. But actually, what will probably happen is that it will be a wiggly line. We will go all over the place. But as we take those turns, we learn things, we pick them up. Just like I did with going, what am I doing here? Why am I talking about productivity? You kind of pick things up as you go along and you refine your journey. So what feels like a wrong turn can often also be really good information to help us to refine what we do next. So the more we obsess about having to get it right, the more we're going to be confused, and think, I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I should get out. But instead of having, I have to get it right, then maybe actually I get to make this up as I go along. This is an experiment. So whatever feedback I get, it's good information. I can use that. I can refine it. I can decide where I go to next.
I think I'm so excited to be talking about these points, because those listening might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with time management? It has everything to do with time management, because time management, well, if time can even be managed, time is going to tick, right? You're going to get your 24 hours regardless. There's no question about time's job. It does its job precisely right. But the principles that Grace is talking about, these are the things that will get you moving quicker, that will get you to make decisions faster, that will keep you from second guessing yourself, which is where the procrastination comes from, which is where the perfectionism comes from, right? So this whole idea, when she talks about first point, you won't know everything. I laugh because, I've done the interview series before. And when I did my first one, I got all kinds of great, feedback, and it was great, but I had no idea how to do it. And the first person that I reached out to, the first stranger, speaker, whomever I reached out to, I wasn't prepared. And I did it because I was like, I just need to get in there and I just need to go, right? And I'm one who likes to be amply prepared, but at the same time, I also am like, it's good enough to just roll with it. You'll get the feedback and you'll, whatever. But I was actually very unprepared. And I leaped because I was under pressure from someone else to leap. And so I just leaped. I went into this conversation with this woman and got my ass handed to me. So bad. So bad. And it was just it's like one of those conversations where you're like, oh my gosh, can I just fall under a rock? It was just so bad. Part of it was my lack of preparation. Part of it was my uncertainty. Like there was a whole lot right? So I get off this conversation, and she clearly didn't join my interview series. But I got off the conversation and I was like, well, that didn't go well. And what are all the things that went wrong there? Right. And I completely rewrote my approach. I rewrote how I was going to market. I sat there for 20 minutes and I just redid everything, because there was lots wrong, and it was all me that was wrong. But I didn't take offense to that. Like because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know, like there are now best practices. And even as I'm going through the process now, there are better practices and it gets refined and refined. But that interview series ended up being wildly successful. It was wildly successful for lots of reasons, for revenue reasons, for different reasons. It was really successful. And so the point is, you're not going to know everything, to Grace's point. But if you know that, then you release yourself from the pressure of having to know that. And you release yourself from the pressure, from the uncomfortable feelings that are certain to come in that process. And it's going to allow you to make the right decisions faster, do the right work. And we're going to talk about right work later. But those are the pieces that are key. But the idea that there is no right is amazing. And there's a third thing that you say that I think that dovetails into that. And it's this idea that you have the right to change your mind. So just because you make a decision, one way, doesn't mean that after you get your behind handed to you, you can't make a different decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've got three. We've got, you will not know everything. There is no right. So you just go with the gut. Go with the gut. You have the right to change your mind. But then you say, whatever you imagine, you create. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So what we focus on is the thing that will grow. What we imagine is the thing that we will bring to life. And I don't mean this in like a wishing well situation where I'm just going to imagine it is going to miraculously appear. It's more like Google.
Yeah.
So if you type into Google, I don't want Spanish holiday villas, guess what you're going to find? Lots of Spanish holiday villas. So, basically what we imagine becomes our experience. It becomes a thing that we look for. Our brain gets kind of tuned in towards it. So if we are filling our imagination with all the things that could go wrong, all the sort of what if in the disaster scenarios, or all the worry about what I don't have and what I'm not qualified for, what I'm not sure about, then we just end up creating all of that. That's what we create because that's what we notice. So it can become like an open door or a shut door. So we can use our imagination to shut everything down if we end up going, well, all of this stuff could go wrong. Or we can use our imagination to open doors to go, well, what would happen if this? And what about that? So we can activate almost curiosity instead of fear, and start to kind of create from that point. So focusing on like what you do know rather than what you don't know, for example. And again, I expand on that in Struggle, where I talk about sometimes we read signs wrong. So if you feel nerves, for example, we can end up reading that as a sign that we're not cut out for this, that there's something wrong with us, we're not prepared, we're not ready. But nerves can also mean that we care. Right? Could also mean, oh, no, this means that I really care about this. Like, this is the work I'm meant to be doing because I care about it. Same with, things like, fear basically often will say danger, keep out. Fear is a protective emotion. It's saying, look, don't go there. It's risky. We don't know what's happening there. Just stay out. Whereas if we activate curiosity, we can actually go, oh, that's interesting. Let's take a closer look. And one of the things I also talk about is courage actually says this is sacred ground, enter. So it's like the complete opposite to fear. And so in the void, because the void is basically a creative process, it's that gap between having an idea and bringing it to life. So actually where we put our creative imaginations is what we will create. So if we're constantly thinking about worry, we're just basically putting all that imagination into creating what we don't want. Whereas if we start looking at it from a more curiosity point of view, we can start to notice possibilities. We can start to open doors. We can start to go, okay, what if we can use this? So to give you an example, and this is, I think it's really important for people to understand, this isn't just when you're early on in your journey. This can happen at any point in time. So at the moment, I'm developing a new keynote, a new talk about Struggle, my new book. And there's something I'm playing with, which is like a map of the landscape of Struggle. And I'm working with somebody, I'm collaborating with someone on creating this landscape, this map. And I turned up to one of our sessions and I felt like I wasn't ready. I felt like I hadn't done enough work on it. I hadn't quite figured it out. And it was funny because what she said to me was like, Grace, you're very diligent. And I was like, oh, that's a good word.
That's not a good start.
Like I heard the truth there. It's like, why don't we just play with this instead? And actually we swapped it around. So rather than this is incomplete and that's wrong, it was, hang on a minute, if I'm talking to people about struggle, about uncertainty, then maybe an incomplete map might be a good starting point to give them, for them to use that as a way of completing it themselves and mapping out what they're going through. So it's almost like, if this feels not good enough, what if I turn that around and go, but what if this is exactly
Yeah.
What's useful here? How might this be a useful thing? What's almost like, what's great about this problem?
Yeah.
So how can I use this instead of feeling like it's not enough?
Yeah. And I think it's such an important point to bring home to folks, because and I want to make sure folks understand what the void could possibly look like for them. So if you're at a place where you want to radically change careers or do something different, the void is the place between this idea and this thought and you getting hired in an industry or role or something that's completely different than what you are accustomed to. And so in that void, you can have all kinds of questions around, oh my gosh, I've got to network with people, I've got to reach out and ask for help, or, blah, blah, blah. And so that whole idea of the imagination, you can imagine that folks are not going to be open to helping you, that they are going to look down on you, that you're going to somehow look less than, like all of those insecurities that come when we have to reach out to people and ask them to help us in a way that makes us vulnerable. In the void, you get to decide, what am I going to imagine? Because on the flip side, if you imagine that, wow, you are well respected and people are excited to be a part of your strategy and you getting, where you want to go, then there's a different level of enthusiasm and humility, but just a different level of assurance that you walk into, and you can be in an uncomfortable place where you don't know the answers and still be strong in the fact that I don't know the answer. And so when you get to that place, it changes the whole game, because now you have all this input and wisdom and knowledge and experience from other people who can help you get where you want to go faster than you trying to be in your head, researching it, figuring it out, blah, blah, blah. You can nail it. So something that could have taken you 3 months to do, you can do in 3 weeks because you've leveraged the collective power of other people, right? But if you imagine that that they don't want to help, or that you're going to look bad, or you're going to whatever, then that's exactly what you're going to create. But if you imagine on the other side, man, that's where the time shifts happen. That's where the focus happens. That's where the space is created. There's a country western song here in the States that's titled, "What If It All Goes Right?" Right? And so instead of, well, here are all the ways it could go wrong, what if it goes right? And the warp speed that you're able to do things is just amazing.
Yeah. And even what if the wrong place is right where the magic happens?
Right.
Because I love what you said there about humility.
Yeah.
Because when I work with a lot of people, leaders particularly, we have this thing in our culture where we think leaders are the people who know everything. They're not. The best leaders are the ones who recognize what they don't know and recognize the amazing expertise in their team. So actually, if you know everything, you don't need a team. Whereas if you don't know, if you have that humility, you're actually going to be more likely to leverage and nurture and grow that that expertise in your team. You're more likely to lift them up, and that's actually what a really good leader is.
Yeah, absolutely. The other point that you make is this idea of getting tired, and that when you're in the void, when you're trying to start a business, get it off the ground, when you are championing a cause or whatever, when you're just trying to figure out your work situation and get promoted to the next level of leadership, you're going to get tired. And I think as women, we assume that we should be able to do everything at level 10 all the time. I should be this amazing mother and this amazing wife and this amazing friend and this amazing daughter and this amazing leader and this amazing. And all of that comes at a price. So tell us about this idea of being tired and decision fatigue and what we do about that, especially in the void.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of the being everything, I just want to speak in that a little bit first, because I remember that really clearly. For me, it first reared its head in parenting. So we were talking just before we came on that your daughter's 4, my daughter's nearly 13 now, and my son is 16. So back when I started the early parenting journey, I wanted to get it right. I wanted to do it perfect. I wanted to do everything well. Of course I did. And having that kind of background of being a straight A student and knowing how to kind of be successful, it was the hardest thing. But actually one thing that I learned was to embrace imperfection and to embrace the fact that actually, my mantra, which I stole from somebody else, was now to be a good enough parent most of the time, with intermittent lapses into hopelessness and brilliance. So to have, yes, there are hopeless days and there's brilliance and there's something in the middle as well. And that gives you such freedom to not have to be everything to everybody. So that's the first thing I'll say. But the other thing that you mentioned there, decision fatigue. Whenever we are doing something new, we're going to be making a lot of decisions. The kind of things that we're used to doing, our brain has evolved to put in place shortcuts, routines, automatic processes. So if you've been driving for a while and you're taking the same route to work, you don't really have to think about it. So your brain is free to think about other things. That's how our brain creates efficiency in its processes. Now, when you do something new, the things that you'd normally take for granted, you have to rethink. And so there's far more decisions we have to make. And the research into decision fatigue is really interesting. They actually found this from looking at a bunch of parole board judges in Israel. And they looked at how often would they say yes to parole, how often would they say no to parole, and they found there was a pattern. So at the beginning of the day, your chances of parole were about 60%. As the day went on, what do you think happened?
Oh yeah, it's a wrap. You're not. It's a no.
That's it. But interestingly, after a break, it goes back up again. Just before lunch, you've got no chance. After lunch, it goes back up again. End of the day, you've got no chance.
10 more years.
Exactly. So, if you're ever up for parole, you want to go after lunch, not before lunch. But probably a more wider application is just like generally for us, what that translates into is that our ability to make good judgment decisions is like a muscle. Yes, you can train it to do more, but after so many reps, it will get tired. And when it gets tired, we basically go to our defaults. So for a parole board judge, the default is no, because that's the safest answer. But what's our default when it comes to us? So you'll recognize decision fatigue if you know you've been making lots of really good decisions at work and you've been on your game, and then you go home and the little voice that says, "What's for dinner?"
Oh my gosh,
it's
the worst. It's the worst.
Exactly. So it's like, that's where we hit decision fatigue. And so if you think about it, sometimes it's what's for dinner, but sometimes it might be, now's the time that I get to myself to, to start researching new jobs, or to write that application, or to write the book, or to start looking at the new business. And it's like, I've hit decision fatigue. I can't think anymore. Right. So what do we want to do about that? Well, I think first of all, it's recognizing that it's breaks that help us to recover. So making sure we've got breaks throughout the day, but then also just looking at, where does all your decision-making power go to? And are there places where you can reduce that, where you can maybe delegate a decision, or don't make that decision and eliminate it? So rather than having to make all the decisions and make them about everything, it's like, does this really matter? And go.
I love that. I love that point. And when I read it, I was like, we have to talk about that point. And we need to park here, because that what you said about, gosh, when it's time to write the book, when it's time to when it's time to really invest in your perfect work, most of you are investing when everything else is done, when you have given the best of yourself to everything and everybody else. And that is the time when you make the worst decisions, or you have the least amount of energy or whatever. So that, just even being aware of that is critical, because then you'll understand, why is it taking me so long to do this? Or why am I struggling so much with this to move forward? Or why do I have so much fear and all of that, right? But this idea of systematizing, and how can you, especially when you're in the void, you need to make as few decisions, as unnecessary decisions as possible. And so finding those places where you can put in routine and you can put in systems where you don't have to think about it. I think for me, the biggest, when she talked about what's for dinner, it's like scratching on a chalkboard for me. I'm like, I don't know. not because I don't want you to eat. I just don't know.
Can't think anymore.
and so the remedy for that is figuring out what is the food menu. Like, what is the 2-week menu going to look like? This is what we're going to eat on Monday, on Tuesday, and this is going to be for lunch, and it's done. And I'm one who likes to cook. I like my family to eat healthy food. And so then I've got to have this grandiose plan of all of the things that, the 4-course meal that's going to be served for dinner. And last night I was like, no, it's cabbage and rice. You're eating cabbage. And every Monday you're going to eat cabbage and rice. It's going to be whole, organic cabbage and rice, but it's cabbage and rice. But part of it is because for me, that decision is actually really stressful. I would rather prepare for an interview series than figure out what we're going to eat for the week. It is just not an easy decision for me. And so the more that can get systematized, which I have not perfected it, and I've had to lower my standard for what the menu's even going to look like, because that's how we got to cabbage and rice. And so, but it takes away a stressor. Because it's not just in the moment that it's a stressor, it's the thinking about, I know this question is coming. I know I need to have an answer. And you might be thinking about that 2 hours ahead of time, and you still don't have an answer when the question comes. And now you're pissed off because you don't have the answer. And you're also pissed off because you've been thinking about it for 2 hours and still don't have the answer.
And then you tell yourself, I should know this by now.
I should know this by now. We eat every day, right? But that's in everything. That's whether it's in your workout routine, or, what's the plan? What's the thing that you just do automatically that takes the decision out of the thing, right? And so when you don't have to make those decisions, when someone else you can delegate that choice to somebody else, it makes all the difference in the world. And that led me to an extra point that I want to throw in here that wasn't Grace's, but as I thought about that point, I was like, in order to be able to do that, I at least for me, and maybe anyone else that's listening, I recognize that I have to lower my standards sometimes. And I think as high achieving women, you have this standard, you always want to show up with excellence. Like, I want to have an event that's excellent. I want to, my clients, I want them to experience excellence from me. And there are certain places where, yes, that's very appropriate. And then there's other places where excellence isn't necessarily the mark. And I have to relax that expectation. In order to relax that expectation, then I can delegate it to somebody else to do it, even if they don't do it. And I think you mentioned this in your book, even if they don't do it as well as I would do it, if they don't do it how I would do it, or whatever, or maybe they might even do it badly, but at least I didn't have to do it.
And it's done.
And so I think for many of us, we go hard. It's all or nothing. I literally I was redoing my closet, and I was taking pictures of all the shoes and putting them in a box so that they had a picture, and then I could, all of this. That's a heck of a lot of work that I didn't anticipate when I started. So now there's this rack of shoes that are stacked up in boxes in my bedroom that I walk in, and I'm not upset that there's these rack of shoes. But for me, it's going to take all day to get it done. When in actuality, maybe it's just 3 shoes a day that you organize, and so maybe it'll take longer, but this idea that somehow I have to have this pristine project from start to finish, it's now been like 4 weeks, and my husband was like, babe, this was really great, and I know it's a big project, but can you, what you gonna do with this? Like, do you not know I've got more important things? But I've created this monster that, because I can't do it right, I'm not going to do it at all, when in fact, over the course of the month, I could have actually gotten it done if I'd relaxed the standard for what done was.
Absolutely.
And I think for a lot of women, we have these standards of how we're supposed to show up. And because we have standards like that in every area, when it comes to perfect work, we either don't start it because we can't do it at that level, or we're so overwhelmed with everything else that there's no room and there's no space. Yeah. And so my hope is that in this conversation, it was all about pressure, that even just some of these points that we've talked about, when you figure out which ones are your triggers, that just tackling, you don't have to tackle all 6, just tackle one. But if you just kind of marinate on one of them, you'll feel like, man, that releases so much pressure. And now I've got some space to really do the thing that's calling, to my heart, to my spirit, because now I'm not bogged down by this has got to be level 10 in every area, if that makes sense. Those were powerful points to me. And so that's going to lead us in. I really want to talk very briefly about this because I know that we're running close to time, but I think that leads us into this concept that you have in your book that I love. And it's this idea of real work versus fake work. Because all of us are so like, oh, I'm busy. I got so much work to do, blah, blah, blah. And Grace is like, some of that's is real and some of that's fake. And the fake might be real hard work, but it's fake. It has nothing to do with what it is that you're trying to. So please share that, because I think it's such an important point, and it was actually super convicting. So what do you mean by real work and what do you mean by fake work?
Okay, so real work is the stuff that's going to move you forwards to whatever your goals are. Fake work is still work, but it just keeps you busy.
Yeah.
So it's the stuff that can kind of almost procreate more work. It's the I'm going to mess with this thing over here, and that means I'm going to have to make a whole load of more decisions and and do all of that kind of stuff. So when you're starting a new business, for example, fake work could be working on perfecting that brochure or that website instead of just getting it out there. It's like you're creating more work for yourself, but actually it's not making any difference. Your real work might be picking up the phone to that potential customer instead of perfecting the website over here, or hitting publish on that blog post instead of waiting until it's perfect. But also it might be fake work, might be all of those emails that you're like trying to get to the end of and living in your inbox, rather than shutting it all down and going, right, I need to really just focus on this big piece of strategic work or this piece of thinking. And again, the biology and the psychology of it is fake work feels productive because I get those little dopamine hits of like, done this, send that email, I'm feeling busy, I'm feeling good. But real work might not feel like that. It might feel like waiting in treacle. It might feel like staring at a screen for 2 hours because you're like, I can't figure it out. And even just recognizing, no, this is the work. This is real work. Means that we don't end up going, oh, that's a sign I shouldn't be here. Everything's wrong. Let's go do something else. It's like I can stick with it because I can see this as like, oh no, this is a sign that I'm in the right place and I'm doing the real work here. Yeah.
What I love about the idea of real work versus fake work is it forces us to get present and hold ourselves accountable to what we actually want and what will move the dial there. And again, I highly recommend folks pick up the book because she writes about it really brilliantly in a way that we may not capture here. But sometimes I've got all these things pinging. Real work would be turn off the phone notifications. But I'm sorry, y'all. But it's too far away. I can't reach it. So I'm like, okay, well, but for me, sometimes the real work, is the scary work. But sometimes it's the real work is the stuff that needs to happen, but somehow I have minimized its importance, right? We talked about kind of this whole psychology of busy and our martyrdom syndrome a little bit. But for me in the void, the real work is I have this mantra where I take impeccable care of my body. And I don't take impeccable care of my body. That's what I aspire to do. But taking impeccable care of my body would be making sure that I'm hydrated really well all throughout the day, that I will stop in the moment and take the 10 minutes to really eat solid, good food, that I'll take, in the midst of, running here and there. Taking impeccable care of my body is that I sleep well and I have a really good sleep hygiene at the end of the night, as opposed to, working up until 10 p.m. and then kind of shutting the laptop off and expecting myself to be able to go into the Zen sleep,
Yeah.
But that's the real work of being able to sustain myself in a way that I create work that I love and that I actually enjoy the process and all of those good things. But I can neglect the real work. The real work is creating the food menu. Why? Because it is like the bane of my existence. But I recognize that if it's done, it will release so much stress off of me. It will help my family to run so much more efficiently, and I can actually be a better leader in my household. But if I will not take the time to actually figure that out, and because it's hard, for whatever reason, that is not easy for me. And everybody's got their thing where it's hard for you. It's easy for somebody else, but it's really hard for you. But if you stick with what is hard, that real work, the payoff is going to be brilliant. And so as you think about what Grace is saying, figure out what's the real work for you. The real work might be working on your marriage and getting on the right page with your spouse so there's not strife and discord in your relationship, because that will then emotionally free you to go after your dream. And you know that that's the real work, but that's the hard work. And so therefore I'm going to go in and do some other stuff and fill myself and still end up being overwhelmed, right? So when we think about real work versus fake work, it's not just about job work. It's not just about career or business work. It's about what's the work that needs to get done emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and otherwise, that is going to help to catapult me and usher me into this perfect work. Right. And so I want to leave you with that because it's so important. And it's so important because then I can say in any given moment, am I doing the real work here? Or am I putting Band-Aids on stuff? In which case it's just going to fester over and it's going to take me longer to get what I want to get. I'm going to be more burned out. I'm going to be more overwhelmed. I'm not going to have space. I'm not going to have focus. And this is all about creating time, space, and focus. And so when you're willing to do that real work, when you understand what happens in the void, then you make certain decisions such that all the strategies and tools and tips, you'll execute on them because you don't have some wonky stuff going on in the back of your head that's messing with all that.
Yeah.
Did I capture that? Did I capture that? Okay.
Yeah.
But real work, it landed with me. It landed. I was like, this is good.
And I think it's also this, it's understanding, it's choosing what's the real work in this moment and in this season
exactly.
as well. Because you can go, well, actually, I can see the value in that. I can see the value in that. I could do this. I could do this. If you're a visionary, you'll probably have way more ideas than you can execute right now. And it's deciding, I'm not going to go for perfection in all of those. Again, going back to those standards, I'm going to choose like my real work right now in this season is this. And when you are clear about that, it's then easier, much easier to spot the fake work. Because then you can go, no, that's just going to keep me busy. That's going to take me away from the real work. Okay, I'm going to let that go.
Yeah. That's a breath of fresh air. I hope everyone else is feeling a breath of fresh air. And so that being said, I'm a big proponent of making sure that folks are able to connect with the folks that we're talking to. And I want to make sure folks are able to connect and stay connected and follow Grace in her work. And so she has provided a free gift for everybody to be able to do that. So I'm going to kind of leave it to you, share where it is, but y'all get it. Whatever she's offering, y'all get it. Get on it. Definitely get the book, how to be really productive, as well as struggle. I'm actually really interested in reading struggle as well. So Grace, I'll leave it to you. What you got for folks?
Thank you. Okay, so if you are done being busy, if you had enough of being busy, then I'd like to invite you to download the first chapter of the book, How to Be Really Productive. So if you head on over to gracemarshall.com/perfect work, that will take you to where you can sign up, pop your email details in. I'll send you the first chapter and we can start a new conversation about productivity, one that's much more meaningful rather than just about getting stuff done.
Yep, I'm telling you, get that first chapter. You just may as well go get the book, but get the chapter because then you get to stay on Grace's and you guys get to have a lovely, beautiful relationship. But just go ahead and get the book. So, in any case, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Grace, for being here. It's been fun. And for all of you, thank you for joining us. I hope that it's been a refreshing conversation for you as well. And so we want to wish you well, and we'll see everybody on the other side. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
So